Welcome to Across Africa, a weekly roundup of stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and coming up, the descendants of survivors of the first genocide of the 20th century returned to the US for their latest attempt to get a New York court to hear their reparations case against Germany. The Herero and Nama people of Namibia are seeking reparations from their former coloniser more than a century after the slaughter. Also, Nigeria's import ban of food from other countries in the region is causing headaches for traders on both sides of its borders. The move is meant to boost demand for local producers, but there are doubts about its long-term effectiveness. And Ivorian designer Lafalaise Dion is the queen of cowries. Her pieces are in global demand after Queen Bee, that's megastar Beyoncé for those not in the know, wore a striking shell headpiece in a music video this year's Lion King album. But first, this month saw the latest stage in a court battle for reparations over the 20th century's first genocide. Descendants of the Herero and Nama people are suing Germany for the colonial massacre of their ancestors in what is present-day Namibia. Over 100,000 tribespeople were slaughtered between 1904 and 1908. The tribal plaintiffs insist that the US has jurisdiction to hear the case. Our correspondent sent us this report.
These Herero tribespeople have flown from Namibia to New York in pursuit of justice for the tens of thousands massacred in their homeland over a century ago.
It's about us making sure that Germany does not get away with murder. So Germany can run, but they cannot hide.
An estimated 85,000 Herero and Nama people were killed under German colonial rule between 1904 and 1908. Berlin's acknowledged the genocide and is negotiating with Namibia to combine an official apology with a fund. But the victims' descendants feel excluded from those talks. After the discovery of Herero's skulls in the American Museum of Natural History 2 years ago, they filed a compensation suit here in New York.
Some of the bones of the victims were actually sold by Germany to the American Museum of Natural History here in New York. So we say the bones of those victims really cry out for justice in U.S. courts in this district in New York, since their remains and buildings purchased by Germany with profits from the genocide are here in New York.
Germany says the suit has no place in a U.S. court.
The United States is not the International Court of Justice in The Hague. This is a U.S. court, and that's what the question is under U.S. law, does this court have jurisdiction to hear the case?
American Namibian scholar Kavemui Murangi feels a personal connection to the case and to the remains in the American Museum of Natural History.
Could be any one of our relatives. I know that my great-grandfather and his wife, they died during the genocide. We do not know where the remains are.
If the judge does not grant jurisdiction, these Herero say they'll take their struggle to the US Supreme Court.
Well, back in August, Nigeria slapped restrictions on cross-border trade with its neighbours in a bid to crack down on smuggling. The bans affect goods that normally come in from Benin, Cameroon, Chad and Niger. And though it's a protectionist measure, traders in Nigeria are also feeling the pinch.
Merchants used to stock imported rice in warehouses on this commercial street in northern Lagos. But since the government shut its borders to overland food imports back in August, rice bought in Asia and repackaged in Benin is no longer allowed into Nigeria. That's left this shop's business on the verge of collapse.
It's a big frustration because so many things now. The government has increased the VAT on some this thing. If you are borrowing money now, the lending rate has increased. But see, where you are making the money has dropped. It's really affecting everybody.
For the Nigerian rice industry, though, the import ban's been a blessing. This factory in Abuja processes rice cultivated by a co-op of over 100 farmers. Over the last few weeks, it's been working overtime to package the grain and get it out to distributors. However, productivity is low and local supplies unlikely to be able to keep up with long-term demand.
I'm not holding anything against the people of Benin. I'm just asking our neighbouring countries and even us as a people to look inwards and try and take control of what we already have at home. I understand neighboring countries might be able to land rice cheaper and bring it in here. But in the long term, we've seen what happens on reliance on importation of goods from other continents.
Despite Africa's biggest economy being heavily reliant on agriculture, Nigeria is also the world's second biggest importer of rice. Abuja's hoping to change that. Turning its back on foreign food imports is a bid to safeguard domestic production.
Only 15% of people in Madagascar have regular access to electricity. Its power infrastructure falls far short of what's needed, and communities are growing increasingly frustrated with the inconvenience and dangers of the shoddy service.
Claudine and her family have been living in this makeshift tent for almost 6 months. Their home was one of 20 houses that burnt down in this neighbourhood of Madagascar's capital. The fire was caused by an electrical short circuit.
The short circuit started on that house over there. As the house is made of dry wood, when the pole caught fire, the electrical wire spread the fire to our house, which is also made of wood.
In Antananarivo, 60% of fires are triggered by short circuits. These technicians from Madagascar's water and electricity company, Girama, are here to replace an electricity pole. It's a rare sight. The vast majority of electrical installations are 100 years old, with illegal power tapping making the situation even more dangerous.
People connect wherever they want without permission, and the transformers can't take the overload. An installation can only hold 3 amps, for example, and there are people doing welding using hair appliances and other high-voltage devices. Cables from their homes can overheat and burn.
But Girama itself has been accused of mismanagement for many years. It has sold its electricity at a loss, buying kilowatt hours from private suppliers at twice the price it sells to consumers. The result? A colossal debt of 300 million euros and frequent power cuts to save electricity. This electronic equipment salesman is tired of the power cuts and has now turned to solar panels.
When I used to buy electricity from Girama, whenever we watched TV shows, it would always cut out when it got interesting. Since we've been using solar panels, we can use all our devices.
Only 1 in 10 people in Madagascar currently have access to electricity. But with the country enjoying nearly 2,800 hours of sunshine per year, turning to solar energy could offer the country a more reliable and greener source of power.
Food blogger Ibrahima Ndoye has been whetting the appetite of his ever-growing number of followers by opening up his kitchen online. The Senegalese foodie posts his favourite recipes with detailed instructions in a bid to help people develop their own taste for African cuisine. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
In Europe or the United States, food bloggers are everywhere. There aren't as many in Africa. But in Senegal, Ibrahima Ndoye, who's a salesman during the week, posts videos of his recipes every weekend on social media. He now has 126,000 followers on Facebook.
We have peanut powder here. It gives the dish a specific taste, and it allows us to replace a little of the fat that we would have put in the sauce.
After buying food from his local market, Ibrahima goes home, sets up his camera and starts cooking Senegalese dishes.
If you like African dishes, you will find that there are very few good online videos. The list of ingredients are usually incomplete, the recipes are not very precise, and the way the videos are filmed is not good at all. So I thought, here's a challenge for me.
His videos are not only watched in Africa. He has received messages and questions from people living in England, Italy and New Zealand. Very often, his friends come to his house to try out his recipes.
This is really tasty. And thanks to the chili, we reach great heights.
As his online popularity soars, Ibrahima might one day need to open his own restaurant.
Now, Ivorian designer Lafalaise Dion has seen global demand for her cowrie shell creations skyrocket ever since megastar Beyoncé wore one of her headpieces in a music video for this year's hit Lion King album. Well, a literal world of possibilities has opened up to Dion. But along with that comes the risk of knockoffs and copycats. Our correspondents went to meet her in Abidjan.
A photo shoot in Abidjan. A young model is fitted out in a new dress made of shells under the guidance of designer Lafalaise Dion. The queen of cowries constantly updates her Instagram account with new creations.
Sometimes I model the pieces myself, and other days I use somebody else. That's the only way for me to see the true beauty of my work.
Her collection is based on cowries, a shell used by West Africans for centuries. She also draws her inspiration from the outfits of Ivory Coast traditional masked dancers.
I started doing research around spirituality and ancestral knowledge. I was always coming across cowries. They were used as currency, but also to decorate women's bodies.
But her career took off when Beyoncé wore her shell headpiece in the Spirit music video. In a matter of seconds, Lafalaise Dion became one of Africa's most popular fashion stylists.
Almost 80% of my customers are from America, mostly African Americans. They are fascinated by cowries as they form a legacy left by their ancestors. It also represents African spirituality.
Sales went through the roof. Dion now has an apprentice to help her, but her work in the industry has now been copied. There is a fine line between inspiration and imitation.
People know that cowries are a part of their African heritage. They think that my pieces are made by others too. So they would rather do them themselves instead of buying them from me.
Having studied journalism in Abidjan, Dion became the content manager of Elle magazine in Côte d'Ivoire. But her career as a fashion designer is taking over.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. And do so again if you can. Take care.